You are listening to the new man beyond the macho jerk and the new age wimp. Your host is men's coach Tripp Lanier.
Are you losing friends or family members over differing political or religious beliefs? Are you being played by institutions that demonize their opponents so you'll give them money? And how can we break through the toxicity and polarization that distracts us from making positive progress? Bill Shireman makes a living helping corporate and institutional enemies find common ground. He's here to discuss how the rest of us can avoid the mind games that have us believe our neighbors are the enemy. Welcome to The New Man. Today we're talking with Bill Shireman. He is the president and CEO of Future 500, where they specialize in finding common ground between uncommon allies. They've bridged gaps between major corporations and activist groups, which is no easy task. You can learn more about them at future500.org. Bill, thanks for being here today.
Really pleased to be here with you, Tripp.
I reached out on Facebook a while back. There was so much toxicity seemingly in the world. There's so much polarization going on, whether it's political or in our community for various things that are happening. And I reached out. I was like, is anybody out there bringing people together? Is anybody that actively understands this process and isn't just preaching to their own choir? Like, is there anybody that can say, hey, I know that we are seemingly enemies here, but how can we work together? And I got lots of great names. Yours came to the forefront. I did some research on you. I was really excited. Like, you're a conservative that lives in San Francisco. What are you like? Are you like one of four conservatives? Like you guys get together for coffee or like?
something like that. It's four or five of us, I think, or 8% of the population in San Francisco here is Republican, and I'm Republican because I believe in free enterprise. I believe in liberating people who have been oppressed. I believe in a small government and empowering people rather than government or corporations or other institutions. And I think that's where the Republican Party perhaps started. But I don't think that's where the party is today. And I think the Democrats as well tend to be a party of division and subtraction. They take away from us in pretending that in so doing they're going to give to us. They take away a sense of personal power and personal agency, as does the Republican Party in its institutional form. And I think it's time that we change that and restored the original purposes of these parties and of every other institution that we have intended for ourselves here.
Got it. That's a whole other conversation. Maybe we'll have you back on to talk about that at some point. But the reason why I wanted to have you back in is because I'm noticing as we kind of drive through our neighborhoods and we might see a sign in our neighbor's yard and there's a thing that comes up and like either that guy's on our team or he's evil. He's trying to destroy. Right. Like there's something where we're turning against one another through this sense of ideas, and I know that that's your forte. Is like how do we bring people together? So for the guy that's out there, he's on the treadmill or he's stuck in traffic right now. I want to see if there's something we can learn from you that'll help him bridge some gaps, whether it's in his own organization or his community or his family. So I guess my first question is, what's going on here? Why is there so much toxicity? Why is there so much polarization?
Well, I think that we have divided ourselves because it works for our institutions, it works for our media, it works for our embedded corporations, it works for the government to have the people divided. It's not that anybody necessarily conspired to have us divided, but it simply works to the advantage of the status quo if the people are divided between the left and the right. And I think that's what we have to discover. You'll notice that those signs divide people. When they divide people politically, they're dividing them between the left and the right, between conservatives and progressives, between people who can appreciate tradition, the value of tradition, can see the dangers that can come from newness and from external sources, the risks in nature, the risks in people. That's the conservative side of us. And then there's the progressive side of us, which sees the possibilities in people, understands that people can be selfish and negative, but sees them in their full potential. And those two sides of us really need to work together. Those are the sides that keep us safe and keep us progressing at the same time. Unfortunately, our media loves to have those sides divided from one another. Our media has divided us into, the Fox News group that will only see the conservative side, and the MSNBC group that will only see the progressive side. Our elections do the same. Our business institutions, that are so involved in politics, know how to game us, to pull us aboard. Our labor institutions do the same thing. None of these institutions are evil. The people within them are overwhelmingly good, but they all find it to their benefit to keep us at odds. Yeah. And so now we have a crazy society where, we are just battling each other in the fiction that one side is going to win and be in power forever, and that will actually be good for us.
Yeah, that the way forward is to have one team beat the other. It's like Super Bowl Sunday, instead of recognizing that optimally there's a progressive side in each of us, there's a conservative side in each of us, and it's how do we have those things bridge the gap. One of the things you said there, I in my previous business, I was in media. I had political consultants that I worked with, and I remember talking to one of them, and he said it's really hard to make money. It's really hard to raise money when people aren't scared. And that was his job, right, was to go out there and scare people so that they could raise money. And I remember my gut sinking in that moment. I was like, oh, we're creating a problem here so that more money will be made. And you just spoke to that.
It is, it's really disappointing. And again, I don't want to blame anybody in this, because our job, my job with Future 500 is to work within all of the system, all the establishment institutions of the system, work within them and between them. And I have yet to find the true demon there who's actually intended to create a system like this. But when I used to run a nonprofit group to raise money for the environment and to pass good laws, we tested mailing. And we found that we could make 2.5 times as much money per mailing if we had an enemy, a demon, and an immediate risk, an immediate threat. We'd make 2.5 times as much, which means that we could actually raise that money. When we sent out mailings that were positive and optimistic and championed the best in people and noted the progress that we've made, we lost money on them.
Okay.
So, every social cause out there knows that they have to pretend to their members that things are getting worse, that the abyss is just around the corner, and that if they don't act now, then disaster will strike.
That's how you get people motivated. That's how you get them to take action, is you got to convince them that the end of the world's getting ready to happen.
The end of the world is upon us. We must act now. So the right believes that, and they blame the left. The left believes that, and they blame the right. Corporations, believe it, and they blame the activists that are regulating them. And the activists blame the corporations that are, in power. We can't solve these problems in separate silos. We need each other. There's a reason, a mission for every institution that we have. If we just battle each other, then we will indeed reach the abyss, but not the way that we think.
It seems like that's where the confusion has been, that the mission has turned from, whatever it is, progressing certain policies that are going to help us. It's turned into get the other guy. He's the demon. And I've heard you talk about, I watched one of your videos where you talk about this process of demonizing the other side and stripping away their humanity. It's not unconscious that this is happening.
No, it's not. In fact, it's a part of the formula. If you become a professional in any industry, for-profit, nonprofit, you will eventually be taught the formula that works to advance the institution. And if you're selling snack foods, as I used to, the formula is sugar and sweet and fat. You maximize those, and you sell a lot of snacks. If you are selling a cause, the formula is that you sell fear, you sell concern, you sell worry, and people buy it, and you can raise money as a consequence of that. Well, that has a cumulative effect where it dehumanizes the people in those institutions. We become machines that are serving the institutions rather than using the institutions to serve us. So I advise everybody, whether you are working for a for-profit or a nonprofit, you feel like your life is lacking a little bit of purpose, to challenge the formula inside your institution. It really has to start inside. Don't just attack the other institution. Work inside your institution and realize what its mission is. The mission of a company is not to maximize profit. The mission of a company is to provide a service that enhances our prosperity, to enhance prosperity, and always be a nudge agent inside to nudge your institution toward advancing its mission rather than its self-interest. When you advance its self-interest, you're taking from others. When you advance its mission, you're giving to others, and you still get to profit as a consequence.
And this all sounds great, and it sounds like something that's easy to say as we sit up here in the bleachers looking down on the game.
Yep.
But you get in the trenches and you help those people that are at odds meet. Like, can you give us an overview? Like, how does that work? How do you get in there and start to challenge these missions and get these things done? You're talking about what you're talking about now is like within an organization, but I know you do them kind of across boundaries too. So I'd love to hear some examples. Like, how does this work?
Sure.
Where have you seen this work?
Let's take a classic example. Big oil versus environmental groups. ExxonMobil, let's say, the world's largest privately held oil company, and Greenpeace, the world's biggest brand name in the environmental community. Those are two that you would think would be completely at odds. And in fact, they do battle one another in the media, with Greenpeace criticizing ExxonMobil as a big oil company trying to profit at the expense of the earth, and ExxonMobil feeling a sense of offense that they are constantly targeted by those activists. A few years ago, we did a little experiment engaging those two together. Now, they wouldn't meet with each other in person, because if you meet with people from the other side, then you discover something odd about them, and that is that they are human beings, that they are complex individuals, and that you feel a sense of empathy toward them. So a lot of people in these political battles, they just won't meet with each other, and they say, well, because of some kind of, righteousness or something, but they really don't want to meet because they don't want to discover that those other people are actually human beings, and that they have some empathy for them, that they've destroyed the demon in their mind. So we met separately with these groups, and we talked to them about, well, what's the real, most important solution to climate? You got you're battling over pipelines, you're battling over regulations, and so on. What's the real fundamental cure? And both of them said, well, we need a price on carbon. We need a carbon tax. Nationally, we need to put a price on carbon. And we said, okay, well, that's great. It's, common bond. So how much should this carbon tax be, and what should its objectives be? We worked with both of them. We developed a solution to climate involving a tax on carbon. And we developed the exact same language, the exact same word for word, a federal law that was vetted by folks within both of those organizations, and they both agreed 100% with the exact same wording. Now, they didn't know that we were engaging with the other side, and if we had been, they might have, been suspicious or, figured out. They completely agreed. Yet they are still battling, and that's how our political system is set up to keep people in battle. Greenpeace can't raise money if they're not demonizing another side.
Wow.
And the corporate community really can't get things through Congress if they're not playing the political game. So both sides are gamed. Both sides have access to solutions that are cheap, easy, and effective, but they are not politically viable right now because the system is structured to keep them apart. That's a tragedy.
It is a tragedy. It seems like they're more, instead of being, attached and committed to the outcome, they're more attached to being seen as a member of a tribe, and that tribe means that they're against the other tribe. And it just seems very primitive in that way, that they've lost sight of what the real end goal is. It's more about, I'm against those guys, which means we're together. There's something like that.
It is. It's very tribal. And I think we all have a sense of tribal impulses within us. We grew up in tribes, in small communities. We all had our roles in those tribes. And one of the roles that we all shared was being watchful of the tribe on the outside. And so when we feel like there's another tribe, we're watchful. At least half of it, at least the conservative half of us, are very watchful and very distrusting of that tribe. And we carry that into our politics now, where it is almost more satisfying for people to notice a tragedy that's on its way and to let it happen in conflict with the demon that they've decided to blame it on, rather than to actually do something about it, which requires that they engage their adversary as a human being.
I don't get the sense as I listen to you that that's going to change, that's more of just like a mindset. It's a level of development. That's not going to change. Is that right? Or do you see us evolving out of that? Or like, are we going to hit a wall where like enough is enough and we stop doing things that way? Or is that just going to be on a continuum?
Well, I think it is a part of our nature, but that doesn't mean that we can't create cultural forms of civilization that harness our nature for good. This tendency to divide people into these extreme camps has not always led society into decline as it is ours today. In fact, before the Industrial Revolution, humanity existed in tribes where there was a balance of these tendencies. Now, tribes were not as prosperous as we are today. Tribes faced all kinds of material lacks, educational lacks, and so on. So nobody's suggesting that we go back to that tribal time, but the Industrial Revolution that brought us into a new civilizational structure split us in two. It divided us into specialized parts, divisions of labor in factories, in offices, that were separate from one another and kept us from engaging with one another. Fundamentally, it separated the masculine from the feminine. It said men are over here, and they're the breadwinners. So they're going to be all masculine in their societal roles. And it said women are over here. They're going to be the bread bakers. And they're going to be all feminine, all connective in their roles. Now, we all are a mix of masculine and feminine. The two cannot exist apart from one another. We all have a sense of connection to one another, and we all have a sense of power to do as individuals. But when we did that division, it meant that we had male-dominated institutions, for the most part, that were overly masculinized, separated from their purpose, and vulnerable to becoming the way a lot of institutions are now, just out to maximize their own, they call it profit, maximize profit. That's really to maximize power within that institution, to perpetuate the institution rather than to advance the mission. We need to integrate those two halves of ourselves. We need masculine and feminine together in all of our institutions. And that's what we're lacking right now. So when men feel a sense of, what am I in this rat race for? Why am I coming to work? What am I battling for? Shouldn't I just give up? It's really an opportunity for them to bring in their purposeful side and to say, I don't work for an institution anymore. I recognize that the institution works for me. If the institution has a mission and a purpose, it's a tool. And as a part of that institution, my responsibility is to use that tool to advance the mission of the institution. And that doesn't set you at odds with the institution as you might think. What it does is it puts you above the institution, able to be a strong, effective leader, an inspirational leader. The best corporate leaders are the ones that really understand the mission of their organizations, and they chart a path toward that mission, and the rest follows. That's what we have the opportunity to do.
It sounds like we're getting this sense of like we're talking about power over other people. And whenever I'm just getting this sense of like whenever I'm feeling like I'm in this place where I'm starting to drink the Kool-Aid, that whoever's on the other side of that wall is my enemy, I'm being played. Yeah. I'm being played. There's a chance that I'm being played to someone's advantage. Someone above me is using that to have power over me. And then I'm getting this shift in mindset that says, wait a second, how do I use this institution? How do I use this organization or whatever it is to serve me? We can be working on this together and then start to see how these parts, we can serve one another instead of be at odds one another, because that power over is going to use division to keep us under their thumb.
Yes, Very much, very much.
Okay.
We are being played when we're put in this position, when we're maneuvered by communications professionals, by advertising, by narratives in our media. We're being played. Now, I don't blame the people that are playing us because we're playing ourselves. It's a vicious circle with each one of us demanding that our institutions prosper at the expense of other institutions. We're all a part of creating the culture in which we
Right.
play one another.
Right.
So I am not blaming the 1%, the 10%, the 99%, the corporations, the government, the labor unions, the environmental groups. I'm not blaming anybody. But I am calling on every individual to stop thinking of these institutions as separate from themselves, and certainly stop thinking that they work for these institutions. The institutions are always tools. That's all they are, and they work for us.
Huh. I like that you put the power back into the individual, into our step here, because it would be easy to just want to demonize whatever. Like you said, you went through that list of people there. But the reality is if we didn't want it, it wouldn't exist. That we're somehow buying into it, that we're co-creators of this dynamic. And so it's up to us to look in the mirror and say, where am I choosing this, and where can I make a shift?
Exactly. And it's a fairly subtle shift. People don't have to completely, abandon their lives and change their lives. It's a sense of recognizing your own power as an employee, as a customer, as a voter. Recognizing your power, that in itself is an act of empowerment. Once you recognize your power to have an impact, then you follow the steps that flow from that, and you actually do have an impact, and you turn the tables. And as you get used to exercising this kind of power, you have a greater sense of personal fulfillment and purposefulness in your life.
You gave us an example of how the organizations, you help those organizations see eye to eye. Can you give us an example of what this would look like on a personal level? A guy that has been up to this point thinking that it was him against the institutions, or having basically creating all these villains and demons out there. What does it look like for him to take the power back for himself?
Well, let's just take a look at a real situation. Coca-Cola Company and activist groups butted heads several years ago over the issue of genocide in the Sudan. And here's how it came about. So you had, on the one hand, anti-genocide activists who were understandably shocked and mobilized to prevent the genocide that was happening in Sudan. And in order to build a campaign, they needed to have an enemy. Now, they could have blamed the government, but nobody knows about the government particularly. It doesn't raise much money to blame the government. So they knew they needed a corporate enemy. And they looked around and they said, well, Sudan sells a lot of its oil to China. China, at that time, was having the Olympics, 2008 Olympics. The biggest sponsor of the 2008 China Olympics is Coca-Cola. Therefore, we can argue that Coca-Cola, in supporting China, is supporting China's purchase of oil from the Sudan, which is supporting genocide in Sudan. Now, that's a pretty tenuous set of connections there, but it does give you the ability to blame Coca-Cola for genocide in Sudan. So they mounted a big campaign against Coca-Cola, had op-eds in the paper calling for change and so on. Well, smart people within Coca-Cola said, this is an opportunity for us. We can actually do some good in the Sudan, but we have nothing to do with genocide in Sudan. We have operations in southern Sudan. Why don't we mount an effort to help build civil society in South Sudan? And why don't we reach out to the human rights folks and see how we can work together toward that? They formed an alliance. They've worked with Oxfam. We introduced them to the folks who were carrying out the campus campaigns, criticizing the company. And the activists discovered they could accomplish much, much more by working with the company than by pretending that the company was the demon in order to raise money to go out and try to do something about the cause. They had a direct impact. was able to dedicate profits from its operations in South Sudan to build up civil society, to build out the capacity of South Sudan to actually become a separate nation. They were part of the peace-building process. Now it is complex and difficult, and we all know, it remains difficult in Sudan. But the activists were able to accomplish something because a few thoughtful employees within Coca-Cola, instead of responding to this attack with a counterattack, decided that they would work together with the activists to actually solve the problem.
Got it. That's complex. That's a lot, and a lot of moving pieces there. The thing I'm taking away, though, is a few people started to speak up. They started to see where it wasn't okay, and they started writing. They started letting their voices be known. They started to make connections in there, and instead of just building another wall to separate themselves, they opened up a dialogue. Hey, what's possible here? And I like that you said there were some smart people in there. Instead of attacking the other guy and trying to defend, they said, yeah, let's try to do some good here. It opens the doors for another possibility there. I want to see how we can help this guy that maybe he's looking across his street and he sees a political sign in his neighbor's yard and he's just like, oh my God, this guy, I can't believe I'm next to this guy. He must be he's going to try and tear down our what makes our country great. So what is it that he could do? We talked about a few things here of breaking down this myth of a demon. I've heard you say before they care about what we know, they need to know what I care. Let's go through some of that stuff if we could.
Yeah. Well, when somebody is really passionate about an issue and they come across as fanatics, we all are part-time fanatics. We all are triggered by messages that we receive that speak to our back brains, that speak to the automatic responses. And when somebody's really, really passionate about an issue, they might find themselves to be politically conservative because they absolutely support the right to keep and bear arms. They might find themselves to be, passionately liberal and progressive because they absolutely want guns out of their communities. Wherever they are on the spectrum, they are likely to understand a truth, a particular truth, and all they really want is for you to hear their truth as well. So when we work with people who are passionate about an issue, the first thing to do is just sit down with them and chat and hear what they really care about. If we chat with them, if we discuss with them, then we show them that we care. And as you said, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. If you go to someone who holds an opposite opinion from yours on, let's say, right to life, right to choice, abortion, if you go to them armed with your point of view, demanding that they accept what's important to you, they don't feel heard at all, and they close off to what you're trying to force upon them. If, on the other hand, you say to them, I'm really interested in your view on this and why this is so important to you, and you listen until you get it, until you get what emotionally they are connected to, what really matters, because emotions point us to what actually matters. Then you can validate that emotion, and you will find that it's a legitimate emotion. You'll find that it's legitimate. You'll agree with it. But that doesn't mean you have to change your position. It doesn't mean you have to agree with, their pro-life or pro-choice position, whatever it is. It just means that you have seen what they're trying to get to, and then they can listen to you and what you're trying to get to. And what we inevitably find is that there are paths toward each of what we want. That even in cases like abortion, there are common ground steps that can be taken that for the pro-life person drastically reduces the occurrence of abortion. And for the pro-choice person, significantly increases recognition of a woman's right to choose. Those two things don't have to be at odds. They're only at odds when we will not listen to and connect with and feel what the other person feels.
Huge stuff. If my focus is on demonizing this other person, if my focus is on needing to be right and needing to minimize where they're coming from, we're always going to be at odds. We're never going to get anywhere. If I'm willing to sit down and just listen and really understand why this matters so much to them, without needing to convince them of anything. That's where we're going to find some common ground. We may actually find that we can have different paths, but ultimately we're trying to get to the same thing. There's something under there where we're not really diametrically opposed. We both want very similar things, but we've got to get through this kind of messy emotional stuff and really get that we're really a lot closer than we might give ourselves credit for.
Right.
Okay.
And we find you can get about 80% of the way to each side's objectives, and you still have 20% that you'll battle over, and you can battle over that, but you can battle it with respect and with understanding of one another. And frankly, if you've accomplished 80% of your goal, you're doing pretty good in life. So take the 80%.
Take the 80%. I like that. Bill Shireman, Future 500. They specialize in finding common ground between uncommon allies, and you can learn more about them at future500.org. Bill, thank you so much again.
Absolutely. Really pleased to spend time with you, Tripp.
If these interviews are helping you, then please visit The New Man on iTunes and leave us a positive review so others can discover the show more easily. Thanks for listening.